Well, hi there, and welcome to another lesson on factoring trinomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. Last time for part one, what we did was we looked at factoring these kinds of trinomials where the number on a was 1. In other words, there was no number there, so a 1 is understood. So today what we're going to do is we will be looking at factoring trinomials where the number a is something other than 1. So there's a couple more steps involved there, so we will see how that works out. Again, it will be a positive number, so the number that is on here will be some other number other than 1, but it will be a positive number. Let's just review part 1 really quickly, and again I showed you two different ways of factoring this. And so the first way that I will show you is what I like to call the no-brainer method, and this is for those of you that are quite good with your mental math, and you can work with the numbers quite quickly, and you can see what kind of number combinations that you're going to need. So to do that, you just set up your set of brackets like so, put your variable in there, and then the two numbers that you needed, they need to multiply to -6 and add to -1. And the only two numbers that work here are -3 and +2. The other way is what I like to call the x factor, because we indeed draw an x on the side of our page, and we are factoring, so hence the x factor. Anyway, I like to call it that. So we're doing the same kind of thing, we're just putting everything down on paper. So what we do is we put the number that corresponds with b down here, and the number that corresponds with c up in there, and the two numbers that we need now are the two numbers that will add to make -1, and they will multiply to make -6. And the only numbers that work here, once again, are -3 and +2, and so those are the numbers that go into your brackets. And we got the same number, or the same answer, which is what we would expect. So all is well so far. Now let's carry on with part 2 then, and looking at how we factor these kinds of trinomials where the number a does not equal 1. And I'm going to show you two ways to do that, and we'll compare with factoring like the x factor, where the number a is 1, and then we'll see how it compares. There's just a couple of extra steps there, but there are a lot of similarities actually. Alright, so if we're factoring this now, this is a different example than the one that we just had. And so we draw our x here, the number from b goes down here, which is -7, and the number c goes here, which is 12. And then the two numbers that we need multiply to make +12 and add to make -7. So the only two numbers that work are -4 and -3, so we put them in there. And then we put those numbers into our brackets, and then now this trinomial is factored. All right, so how does that compare with an example where the number on a is not 1? And as you can see in this case, the number on a is now 3 instead of 1. And so how do we do that now? And there's a couple of differences. So first of all, when we make our x, b goes down here, which is still the same. But now up here, we have to write a times c. So in this case, it's 3 times 4, which makes 12. So a times c goes up here, which is actually is the same as this. It just so happens that a is always 1 for these kinds of problems. A is 1. And so you could actually write a times c right here, because it really is the same thing. And so that way you see some further similarities between the two methods. So we set this up again, we set up our x, we have our numbers in there, and once again it's the same sort of thing. The two numbers that we need in here will add to make 8, and they'll multiply to make +12. So the only two numbers that work here are 6 and 2. So 6 and 2 are the only two numbers that are going to work. Now, here's where the difference lies. What do we do with the 6 and the 2 this time? Well, what we do with it this time, which is different from here, These two numbers are just simply the numbers that we put directly in the brackets. However, with the decomposition method, it's a little different now because we're using these two numbers now to decompose our middle term. We decompose the middle term into, and we use the 6 and we use the 2, so the 8x then becomes 6x plus 2x. Okay, we haven't changed it really because 6x plus 2x does indeed equal 8x. However, we just basically split the middle term into two terms now instead of just one. And we use these numbers in order to do that. So once we've gotten to here, then our next step is to factor by grouping. And so that's why we've done those with the warm-ups, etc. You've seen this before. So we factor by grouping now. And so we take the first two terms, group them together, and we take the last two terms, group them together, and factor what we can from each group now. So from the first group, we can factor out a 3x. We can factor out 3x from this first group here, and then we're left with 3x plus 2 in brackets. And then from the second group, we can factor out a 2, which again leaves us x plus 2 in the brackets. And if you notice, these two, what we have in brackets here, are the same. These two sets of brackets are the same, and that's what you want at this point, because what you can do now is you can factor out this x plus 2. So let's do that, and then we're done actually, because we factor out the x plus 2 here, and then what's left in brackets is 3x plus 2. So that's where this set of brackets comes from. So we factor out the x plus 2, because each of these has an x plus 2, and then once we've done that, what's left over is 3x plus 2, and then you're done. So a couple of extra steps there, but with practice it will get easier for you. So what I'd like to do right now then is to show you another method of factoring this type of a trinomial, so then you can choose which one that you like to do better. So let's have a look here at how we do that. So I'll run through another example of the decomposition method, and then I will show you what we call the box method, which is actually my preference, but I will show you two different ways, see how they compare, and whichever one you like better, then just go with that one. All right, so decomposition method on this one here. Again, we start out by making our x here, and again what goes down here is b, and what goes up here is a times c. So a times c in this case is just 6 times 1, which is 6. So the 6 goes there, and minus 5 goes there. All right, now we need two numbers that will add to make minus 5 and multiply to make positive 6. And the only two numbers that work in this case are minus 3 and minus 2. And like we showed you in the last example, what you do with these numbers then is we decompose the middle term using those two numbers. So the minus 5x then becomes minus 3x minus 2x. And we haven't really changed the equation. All that we've done is just split the middle term using these two numbers right here. Now our next step is to factor by grouping. So we'll do that. So if we factor by grouping here, we take the first two terms, put them together, and take the last two terms and put them together, and then factor out what we can from each set of brackets. All right, so let's do that. And when we do, then from the first two terms you can factor out a 3x. And when you factor out 3x, you're left with 2x minus 1. Because if you multiply that times that and that, you will get this back again. Here we can only factor out a minus 1. That's all we can factor out. And when you do, then this becomes 2x minus 1. Okay, when you factor out minus 1 from this set of brackets here, it becomes 2x minus 1, because that makes it a double negative here on the 1. And this is what you want, because you want this set of brackets to be the same as this set of brackets. Because now you can factor out this set of brackets from each of these terms right here. So that's our next step, and that's our last step actually. So I'll just move this out of the way a little bit for a second. And as you can see, we factored out the 2x minus 1 from there, from both of these. And what's left over then is when you factor out 2x minus 1, you're left with 3x minus 1, and that goes in the other set of brackets. Okay, so basically just a couple of more steps here. You have to decompose the middle term, or in other words, you split the middle term, and the other step was to factor by grouping. Okay, so let's see how that compares with the box method, which is, as I mentioned, that's my preference actually. And we'll see how that works. All right, so we're going to use the same example now. We'll do the box method for this example here as well, and then you can see how they compare side by side. Again, what we want is we want A times C, and we want the number B, just like we did here, really. Okay, you're really not, your first steps are basically the same. So A times C again is 6, which is the same that we had here, and B was minus 5. Okay, and then the two numbers that we need are minus 3 and minus 2. All right, so what do we do with all those numbers now? Well, what we need to do is we need to set up a box with 4 squares inside it, like so. And here's where you have to be very careful as to where all the numbers go. All right, so take a good look at the box and see where the numbers came from and where I put them inside the box. So the 6x squared went up here, and the 1, this one here, this number here, goes down in the bottom corner. And as you can see, the minus 3 and the minus 2 are the numbers that go in front of the variable in these boxes right here. All right, so that's how we use those numbers now, the minus 3 and the minus 2. And what we're going to do is we're going to factor across this way for these two terms, and we'll factor these two terms across this way, and then we'll factor down. We'll factor down these two terms, and we'll factor these two terms down as well. So the first one is on here already for you. So the most that you can factor from these two terms here is 3x. And then from the next two, the most that you can factor from here is minus 1. And when you factor down this way, the most that you can factor from these two terms is 2x. And again, from here, the most that you can factor out of these two terms is a minus 1. Now, when you get to this point, you actually have your answer already. That's why I like this method a little bit better, because it gets you more directly to your answer. Because your answer is right in front of you there, and I will circle them. These are your two sets of brackets, or your two binomials. So there's your answer right there. And we'll write it down there. All right, so we got 3x minus 1, and we have 2x minus 1 across this way. And that makes your two sets of binomials, and that's your solution. And as you can see, it's the same solution as when you do the decomposition method. All right, so you might need to rewind the video a number of times in order to catch all the details. There's a lot of steps there, but with practice, then it becomes easier for you. And see which method that you like better, whether you like the decomposition method better, or whether you like the box method better. Try a few using both methods, and then pick the one that you like better, and then just go with that one.